In 1915, the British ocean liner RMS Lusitania was struck by a torpedo launched from a German U-boat, and the torpedo sank the ship near the coast of Ireland, and 1,191 passengers and crew lost their lives. 128 Americans also lost their lives during the sinking, and at the time the United States was still not involved in the First World War. Despite the Germans' claims that the vessel was carrying weapons of war, the American public was outraged, and the incident was later used as one of the justifications for the United States' declaration of war against Germany. Historians have also noted that the British authorities were aware that a German submarine was operating near the Lusitania's path, but failed to divert the ship, or send a cruiser escort, even though multiple destroyers were stationed at a nearby port. The British government continues to keep documents relating to the final days of the voyage a secret, and in 2008, Irish divers discovered 4 million Remington 303 bullets strewn in the wreckage of the Lusitania, just as the Germans had originally claimed. In 1964, tensions were very high between the United States and North Vietnam, and on August 2nd and August 4th of that year, Vietnamese patrol ships fired on U.S. ships operating inside Vietnam's territorial waters. The American public was outraged by the two attacks, and the United States went to war against North Vietnam shortly after, citing the Gulf of Tonkin incident as their cause for war. It was not revealed to the American public until many years later that the second of the two attacks never took place. This revelation left the original justifications for the Vietnam War on very shaky grounds. From 1920 to 1933, under Prohibition, the temperance movement in the United States outlawed the sale of alcohol. From the start, the government struggled to enforce their ban on alcohol, and in a sinister move, the FBI poisoned alcohol supplies without informing anyone about their activities. Propene and rubbing alcohol were added to kegs, destroying the intestines of anyone who drank from it. The tampering didn't even stop there. Even paint thinner was added clandestinely during the years of Prohibition. These underhanded operations were intended to cause the public to fear alcohol, but Prohibition was repealed in 1933, and the alcohol poisoning operation ended. It is not known how many people died as a result of the FBI's actions. For most of the 20th century, asbestos was mass-produced by corporations seeking massive profits from the material. Asbestos was very effective, albeit dangerous material for insulation and soundproofing. It was well known among scientists and doctors that asbestos was probably very harmful. Even the ancient Romans were aware of the dangers of asbestos, with one account describing asbestos miners suffering from horrific lung problems. Regardless, from 1900 to 1981, a mass conspiracy was orchestrated by asbestos corporations to keep knowledge of the dangers of asbestos from the public at all costs. Campaigns were ordered to smear the reputation of anyone who dared to study the effects of asbestos on your health. None of the asbestos producers have ever admitted to any wrongdoing, and today asbestos is banned in most areas of the world. From the 1950s to the 1970s, under Operation Mockingbird, the CIA actively began to control civilian media in the United States through bribery and coercion to control public opinion. Numerous journalists from outlets including The Washington Post, Time Magazine, CBS, and The New York Times were paid to distribute propaganda. At the height of the operation, even the National Student Organization was secretly guided by the CIA to meld college students' opinions. The operation was eventually uncovered in 1975 and was officially terminated. In 1962, generals from every branch of the U.S. military drafted and approved a plan to orchestrate false flag attacks on civilian targets in the United States. The plan called for bombs to be planted in cities with large amounts of pedestrians, hijacking planes, massacring civilians with gunmen pretending to be Cuban terrorists, and even conducting napalm attacks on civilian vessels in American ports while the crew of the ships were still on board. In all of these potential false flag attacks, evidence was to be planted to pin the blame on Cuba and Fidel Castro. The report even boasted that casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation, Thankfully, Operation Northwoods was never executed, because when President Kennedy became aware of the plan, he called a meeting of the Joint Chiefs and threatened between profanities to court-martial every party involved in the plan. During the Civil Rights Movement, many in the U.S. intelligence community feared the racial problems were going to destabilize the United States. The FBI, under Operation COINTELPRO, sought to target and disrupt civil rights activists. Under COINTELPRO, every black rights group was classified as hate groups and a threat to national security, and the FBI sought out to subvert and destroy them. The operation involved widespread illegal wiretapping, random arrests, and imprisonment of civil rights activists. In perhaps the most egregious act conducted under Operation COINTELPRO, the FBI bugged Martin Luther King's hotel rooms and attempted to break up his marriage. And after the FBI concluded their month-long campaign of surveillance and information gathering, they sent a terrible letter to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. demanding that he commit suicide within 34 days. Between 1932 and 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service conducted an experiment on 399 black men in the late stages of syphilis. The true nature of the experiment was kept from the subjects to ensure their cooperation. These men were for the most part illiterate sharecroppers from one of the poorest counties in Alabama, and were never actually told what disease they were suffering from. Instead, they were informed that they were being treated for bad blood, and the government doctors had no intention of curing them of syphilis at all. The true purpose of the experiment was to collect data from the autopsies of the men infected with syphilis, and they were thus deliberately left to suffer under the ravages of tertiary syphilis, which can include tumors, heart disease, paralysis, blindness, insanity, and death. One of the doctors involved in the gruesome experiment explained, "We have no further interest in these patients until they die." The ethically unsound experiment continued for nearly 40 years until the whistle was finally blown. In 1990, just before the First Gulf War, Nayirah al-Sabah testified on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives that she had personally witnessed Iraqi soldiers enter Kuwaiti hospitals and take newborn infants out of their incubators and throw them onto the cold floor to freeze to death. It was Nayirah's testimony that provided the largest part of the foundation for American public opinion in favor of the military force against Iraq during the First Gulf War. The CIA had paid her to lie, and even paid for her to attend acting classes to appear convincing. It was later revealed that the CIA was responsible for organizing the funds and advertisements to disseminate Nayirah's testimony. To accomplish this, the CIA enlisted the help of Hill & Knowlton, a global public relations corporation. 2 years later, John MacArthur of the New York Times discovered Nayirah was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, and that her story had been completely fabricated. The Iraqis did illegally invade Kuwait, but their soldiers never threw babies out of their incubators. As the 20th century drew to a close, it became more and more apparent that the CIA is heavily involved in the global drug trade, and many possibly control large portions of it. And in 1989, the Kerry Committee report unveiled the CIA's complicity in the Iran-Contra affair. The report concluded that it was clear that the CIA had provided financial as well as material support to the criminal drug trafficking organizations. And in 1996, journalist Gary Webb published a series of articles investigating Nicaraguan drug traffickers. As he tracked their cocaine distribution network from the jungles of Nicaragua to the streets of Los Angeles, he concluded that the CIA was aware of and funding these drug trafficking operations, and suspected that the CIA was profiting from the network to pay for the CIA operations not officially on the organization's books, pushing the drug smuggling accusations leveled against the CIA from just fringe conspiracy theory to a near certainty.